Hey there everybody, it's Eternal Snowman here with another BLT recap and highlight video. This time going through the other semifinals, which was the Poliwrath and the Weaviles. And the first semifinals finished a couple days ago, like 4 days ago or something like that, between the Snorlaxes and Alakazams, and I have a video out on it. The series ended 6-2, but the last two games didn't really matter. But that series has its own video, so you can go check that out in the description or and the eye icon in the top right. And the other semifinals just concluded yesterday, so I'm putting out a video and recording this on it. And as you can see here, what happened actually was a tiebreaker, so we actually have a lot of games to go through. It's 8 games plus 3 from the tiebreak, although I actually, one of the tiebreak games was lost in terms of the replay, so I don't have the replay to go through. However, I'll talk a little bit about what happened since I did watch the game um, at some point right after it finished. So I can kind of go through what went through that game and so going into the series, the Poliwraths are obviously heavily favored as they were like slated to be a pretty good team, where the Weaviles were slated to be like towards the bottom. Um, Although they did sneak out of the group, which was kind of surprising as they went over the Blastoises, who were more favored to come out of that group. However, the this was a pretty still like ended up being a very good semifinal match. So the first game that was played was between the Cheese and One and King Leo. Leo, while being only 2k less than Cheese in the auction, there's a huge skill difference, and Cheese was heavily favored to win this one, so we can just go right into the replay. Cheese went with a relatively standard Tailwind offense team with Volcarona and Suicune as the Tailwind setter, meaning it can cover a lot of different things. Where King Leo went with a Mega Gengar team, which aims to trap stuff in 1v1s, and this has the pairing of Mega Gengar plus Zygarde, which is very good. Where she's opted for Mega Metagross, which is like the purely best mod for just pure offense. So just going into it, they start with Feeny and Gengar, and this is no surprise because Feeny or Gengar teams almost always want to lead with Gengar because the sooner you can Mega Evolve means the sooner that you can trap. So if you can trap early on in the game, then that means that you can create an advantageous state. Cheese knows this, so he leads with his Landorus, and um, Feeny is to cover the weakness of Gengar, of Landorus, specifically on this team, and also to an extent Kyurem. And then Metagross is chosen as likely a Zapdos or a Feeny is going to come out, so he wanted to cover the potential of a Zapdos probably. So that's just a solid lead. Um, and then Gengar just protects, which is standard, where the Landorus, she's knowing this, goes for the Stealth Rocks to get early pressure up. He then protects with predicting the Shadow Ball. He protects with his Metagross, and then knowing he's faster with Landorus, trades his Landorus for the Gengar. So pretty standard first play, and from Cheese, and this kind of shows the experience difference. One of the things that is very important in this matchup, or just in general when using Mega Gengar, is that you always want to preserve your Mega Gengar because Gengar is so important. Even if it doesn't do anything offensively, it can still be the most important mon on your team. And that's because Mega Gengar teams really need to abuse the use of like Shadow Tag because of how strong Shadow Tag is. Shadow Tag by itself as an ability is just so oppressive because the inability to switch out means that you have so much extra time, and being able to get favorable matchups that way is hugely important. And so without Gengar, this matchup already looks extremely difficult. Trading Landorus for Stealth Rocks and Gengar is extremely favorable for Cheese. So he goes into the Incineroar as a standard answer to the Mega Metagross, and knowing this, Cheese goes into Suicune, also because Suicune can set Tailwind. And then he switches his Metagross into Kyurem and just as a way to pressure the Feeny. Knocks the Suicune, which is pretty standard, and then Cheese reveals, I believe this is AV Cube, as yeah, it's AV, meaning it tanks the hit pretty solidly. And then he goes ahead and double focuses Incineroar, feeling that the Feeny would actually switch, which he was correct about. And at this point, the game is pretty much already over, as like it's really hard for King Leo to come back at this point. The Ice Beam, and yeah, so like at this point, it's like pretty much done. She's actually misplays heavily here by not Ice Beaming the Kyurem, but in the end, it doesn't really matter because of what happens. It's also a misplay here to also to protect with the Volcarona, but it doesn't really matter in the end. It's also a misplay to protect with the Metagross, but again, it doesn't really matter. He didn't get punished in any of these scenarios, and he was so far ahead at this point that it didn't matter. So it just like he'll just end up clicking just clicking moves, and then he'll clean up the win. Also, clicking protect here is also a throw, but once again, doesn't matter. Because like if he gets crit here, then he actually loses the game. Well, I think he would lose anyway, but whatever. Yeah, he came actually pretty close to throwing the game, but with the early game plays, it means that he won by so much that it didn't matter that he misplayed a couple times in the end. So the first game goes over to the Poliwrath with Cheese winning. And we can move on to the next replay. And that was between Big Boy and 8th Hokage, who was filling in for OU. Not too sure who their normal OU player is. Let's see. Because I know Raftel Reshrooms has been playing Ubers for the past couple, or for like most of the time. And then TR Hurricane's actually their sub, so their OU player is let me just check. BLT week 3. Their OU player was Les Sabrer, that's right. And so Big Boy goes against the 8th Hokage, and this terrible team. Like, I don't even know what the fuck this is. It's Staraptor and Victini and Haluch. It's like some really cheesy stuff. And I assume he brought this because he didn't think that he could win against Big Boy in a fair match. So he went ahead and brought some really cheesy stuff. And so you can see just like from the beginning, he reveals Final Gambit Victini, most likely Scarf. Goes into the Coco and trades for Heatran, which is pretty good for his 2 sweepers, or 2 of his 3 sweepers. And then he goes into Staraptor, then reveals double Final Gambit as he trades for Zapdos. Well, it doesn't kill, but it almost trades. And that's really good for Halucha. And then for some reason, he Never Ending Nightmares at +0. I don't understand this play at all. It just doesn't make sense as to why he didn't Sword Stance first. And like he still doesn't Sword Stance for some reason. And then he Sword Stance, and then like this was just terrible. That was just like so bad. I don't get that at all. And then he goes into his Coco for some reason. Well, okay, I understand why. Because he wants to get Halucha, the Electric Seed. But, like, he doesn't even, like, U-turn or anything there. And then he gets hit with the Superpower with Big Boy predicting the cart, which is, like, pretty obvious, actually, but yeah. And then he goes into his own Kartana, and then yeah, so and then he goes Bulu, and the matchup's already like pretty much over here because he fucked up like pretty hard, and then he predicts the Sacred Sword. Yeah, goes into his Halucha, but Clef is actually like a decent answer. Then Kartana cleans up from this point. Yep, and that's it. So this game should have probably been won by the Hokage if he literally just didn't Z-move the Bulu on turn 1, or at least there would have been a decent chance. It would put him into some 50-50 situations, but like that was just like so bad. But anyway, with that game, Big Boy lets the Poliwraths go up 2-0, putting them in a pretty good position. However, those two were also like two of their best players, so it was like something that was expected already, as they had two like pretty heavily winning matchups, as both Big Boy and Cheese were big favorites heading into this, their two matches. So next up was the Welshwall versus Negatory. Once again, this is another matchup where the Poliwraths are heavily favored. However, this is also a match that I mentioned as one of the ones to really turn it on their head. So if the Weaviles did want to win this series, this was one of the matchups that was a must-win for because it was the closest of like the quote-unquote blowout games, and it's like one of the places where the Poliwrath strengths really came. So if you can attack those strengths, then that's where they would be able to really pick up like the entire series. So you can see here that the Welshwall brought like a kind of cheesy offense team. Not really cheesy, but like kind of like a huge offense team, or like a Spike's offense team, sorry. And then here he reveals Avalanche Frostlass, well, minus priority Frostlass, where essentially the idea behind it is that after you use Destiny Bond, what people want to do is they want to kill, because you can't use Destiny Bond again, well, like not guaranteedly. It's only a 50% chance the next time you use it. So they will attack that time, but then you use Avalanche or a minus priority move, and they'll attack you. And when they attack you, then they will incur the penalty of Destiny Bond, because they'll go first since it lasts one full turn. This Giga Drain doesn't kill the Slowbro, but this crit kills, and that's actually a big deal because that crit actually mattered. And the Virizion had a pretty good fucking matchup here with beating like almost every mon except for the opposing Virizion pretty safely. This crit doesn't matter, but yeah. He doesn't get the kill on Blastoise. It's a roll, but I think it was in Nightwing's favor and at that point. And then he goes into the Barbacle, predicting the Stone Edge. Here he had a 50-50 between going to Honchkrow and going to Barb. So he went Barb, predicting the Stone Edge. I think that it was the best play to just go for the Earthquake on Rhyperior, because even if you go into Honchkrow, the Honchkrow can't get huge advantages. But yeah. He does get the crit, but it doesn't matter at that point, as he, like the Welshwall is already so far behind that he couldn't have won from that point. So that crit versus Virizion was actually very unfortunate, but the roll I think was in Nightwing's favor, so that's not a huge deal. But the crit versus Virizion was actually a big deal, so that was unfortunate for them, but that does mean that the Weaviles do pick up a win and put them in a much better position at 2-1. But also, importantly, that it was this matchup. Like I did say that if the Weaviles did want to win, this is one of the ones that they should be looking at to win. So going into the next matchup, TR Hurricane versus Micro. I favored Micro pretty heavily in this. However, that's also because I know TR Hurricane is like not as good of a player overall, but it's not like Micro was so good at Ubers that this was an impossible matchup to win. So starts off with the Evil Tall against Arceus. This matchup, okay, actually, let's just go through the matchup first. So Primal Kyogre, depending on the set, will always put in work against this team. It's not a non-Pharaoh team, and unless it's like Rest Pedon or something. And it's likely that Pedon is probably the rock setter, but it's also possible it's Necrozma or Arceus form. Xerneas is likely Scarf on this team as its balance, and then it's most likely a Defog Arceus form for Ho-Oh. So because it reveals Arceus Water, it's most likely Defog Arceus Water. And then one of these two is a rock setter. And then the other one would probably be a sweeper set, like offensive pressure set at least. And then Mars, Shadow, and Zern. So this is like standard balance team. On this side, probably DD Zygarde just because that's what people have been running recently. And then one of these two again is a Stealth Rocker. It could also be the Arceus. And if the case is that this is an Arceus form, then these are both sweeper sets. And then the Evil Tall is probably just standard. It could also be it could also be Scarf. And okay, so then we can just go into the game. So the Evil Tall switches out turn 1. That means that it's not Scarf. Scarf would always U-turn there. So it's most likely a Life Orb set. And then he reveals SR Necrozma. That most likely means it could be Defog Arceus. It could also be a Sweeper Arceus set. It goes for the Brave Bird on the Zygarde, and Zygarde pretty much cleanly reveals that it is a Sweeper set or like DD because of how much damage it took from Ho-Oh Brave Bird. It could also be max defense, and Ho-Oh could be like banned or something, but it's unlikely. Necrozma rocks pretty solidly against the Arceus Water. And then TR Hurricane reveals Arceus Fairy. It's most likely Defog in that case, just because offensive Arceus Fairy isn't hugely good here. He misses the Overheat, and then he goes for the Dragon Tail, pretty much abusing the miss pretty heavily. But unluckily gets put into Xerneas, so he goes into his Necrozma. Micro goes for the Defog, but it doesn't get him anything except for the free Ho. And then he goes into his Zygarde, which gets burned by Sacred Fire. Depending on the Zygarde set, it won't matter, but it may matter in the end because he has no Aroma. And so also Glare pretty much reveals that it's most likely that most likely is actually a DD set, but it goes into a Zygarde on the Pedon, and this is like pretty bad for Micro as he's losing a lot of momentum. Goes into the Evil Tall as he gets parried, which is pretty bad for him. He doesn't take any Life Orb chips, so it could be a couple of sets. It could be Specs. It could still be Scarf, but I see that as unlikely. And it could also be Specs. Wait, did I say that? Or Black Glasses. And then he predicts the Groudon on Kyogre. Goes for Thunder for some reason, which is wrong every time. As for why he would do that, honestly, I can't tell you, because if you're predicting Groudon to switch, Water move would be better anyway. But there's no need to predict, as Earthquake hits everything except for Ho-Oh, and Ho-Oh you can then hit on this after it switches. So he takes Trip on Kyogre for no reason. Goes into the Xerneas, and Xerneas has pretty bad matchup because Necrozma is a thing. And it's, I believe, leftovers Necrozma. Yeah, so that's a thing. Micro is for some reason less HP on Ho-Oh than but he is fast. I think it's banned Ho actually. And then he goes into the Evil Tall. Micro doesn't want to risk it, so he goes into his Zern and gets hit with the Oblivion Wing. This means it's most likely specs, just because clicking Oblivion Wing doesn't kill Home normally from that range. And then he reveals Wisp on Arceus, which is really bad for micro. And yeah, so he keeps Swords Dancing, which is the correct play. And he clicks the Z move here versus the Zygarde, which I believe kills. Yeah, it kills. And then goes on for EQ on Pidon, however, doesn't kill. Unfortunately for him, I believe it was a roll actually. So he goes into his Ho-Oh. This is actually incorrect. He should have gone Marshadow every time there. And then the Yveltal comes in and clicks Oblivion Wing versus Ho-Oh, and yeah. So in the situation that he goes Marshadow, he can actually, well, he kills there, and then he can force out the Arceus, where then he can go into Ho-Oh. Actually, I don't know if it mattered. Yeah, I'm not sure it mattered. Yeah. It's hard to say, actually. I'm not sure if it mattered. Well, if he goes into his Ho-Oh and then tries to kill the Ho-Oh against the Arceus, then maybe he had a chance there. Potentially. I don't know what the calc is on Life Orb versus Spadef Necrozma. But yeah, I think there was a way that Micro could have won that game. Like if he went into Marshadow, doubled into, or like went into his Ho-Oh on the Arceus Fairy and then clicked Brave Bird and killed himself on killed the Ho-Oh on the Arceus Fairy and then goes Marshadow, and then he could clean up the game potentially. Yeah, I think there was a way to win that game, but oh well. So with that was 2-2 to the, or sorry, yeah, 2-2 with Micro losing. Another of the swing matchups, however, I would have favored Micro coming into this, but unfortunately the Hex was in TR Hurricane's favor. Not to say that he played bad, actually. Played decent, other than that weird Kyogre play, which was unnecessary, but he played decent outside of that, and so he picks up the win for the Weaviles and puts them in a 2-2 position, with the remaining matchups being UU, NU, LC, and Mono. So next up was the NU match between Skilos and Twixtree. I would have personally favored Skilos, however this was one of the closer matchups with both sides having pretty competent players and could easily swing in either team's favor. So just going for matchup, Twixtree has a lot of offensive threats with like these for potentially even Incineroar. With Big Air or Skilos bringing Delmise. Delmise doesn't have a good matchup though because Incineroar is a thing. And Braviary is a pretty good answer to it as well. But Passimian is a huge threat to Twixtree, as after Palo is threatened down, it can be quite abused as Slowbro is a thing. And then Slowbro, if it's AV, is also a threat. Well, Slowbro is always a threat. And then Whimsy is also a threat if it's Specs. So, yep. So on turn 1, just leading Passimian is always like a safe play. And then he goes into his Delmise and then quickly just tries to start racking on pressure. Goes ahead and knocks the Incineroar on turn 1, which is pretty good. As then he trades Nox for his own Incineroar. However, notably, this matchup is a lot less important for his own Incineroar, as Decidueye doesn't really get past either Whimsy or Steelix easily at all. So his own Incineroar is less important than Twixtree's Incineroar, which needs to check in Delmise and Whimsicott. So he goes for the Earthquake. If he had U-turn here, I would have liked to see U-turn, but I don't think he actually has it. So he goes ahead and knocks the Palossand. Oh no, he actually did have U-turn. So if he U-turn, I would have liked to see that. And then goes into his Whimsicott on the Shore Up. and goes for Defog, which actually gets immuned because of how defog mechanics work in this generation, or prankster mechanics work in this generation. But it does reveal not specs, which is important. I would have not that. I think that was just like a bad play on Skilos's part, as Twixtree reveals specs, because it was almost always the play for Twixtree to go Incineroar on the Whimsicott no matter what set, so defogging was kind of a bad play. So anyway, he goes for the Twinkle Tackle on Incineroar, just pressuring it, but brings it low enough to the point where now Dhelmise is a big threat. And then he can go for the U-turn freely with the Passimian and go into his Dhelmise, and now the Dhelmise will almost will pick up a kill on Incineroar here with Power Whip. Yeah, he's banded. You would be able to tell by the previous calc, obviously, but yeah. Then he goes into his Incineroar, just sacking it. At this point, it's kind of useless because of the fact that it doesn't put in that much work anymore. I would have preferred seeing Twixtree go for Freeze Dry there just because it's safer, but that would be fine, as he would have potentially been able to bring in Slowbro if it's AV, but it looks like it's not AV from this point. Skelos then trades a lot of his Steelix's HP to put up a Stealth Rocks. I assume this is, I don't really like that play, but he just felt the need to pressure at that point, so he does that. And then he goes into his Dhelmise. Once again, Dhelmise being good here, as Braviary is heavily weakened by that. So Twixtree goes for the Brave Bird, predicting him to stay in on the Roost. But he doesn't get that correct, so he ends up going into his Slowbro. And the Heliolisk pretty much cleans out from this point because, yeah, he couldn't switch into it, so yeah. He goes into his so he goes into his Passimian, and then Twixtree clicks Shore Up, which I didn't super like, but that's fine. So he clicks Power Whip and then doesn't get the kill on Decidueye, which is pretty bad. And Decidueye goes for the Spirit Shackles. I would have just clicked Z move, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. There's no way for Twixtree or Skelos to win at this point, as he just goes. Okay, so like in the scenario here, he clicks Shadow Ball. I'm not even sure if Dhelmise lives. I don't think Dhelmise lives, but in the case that Dhelmise say lives on 1 health, and then he just goes into Vanillux there, and then Vanillux plus the, yeah, so there's no way for Skelos to win at this point, but I saw the misplay really at being the defog on the Whimsicott, as he could have pressured. Say he Moonblasted and then he Twinkle Tackled at that point, that would have been actually a huge advantage to Skelos at that point, and then he could have potentially traded rocks on Steelix earlier or something, or not kept Steelix around as a Volt Switch immunity for later in the game. But other than that, I felt that it was a pretty good game. And this put the Poliwrath ahead 3-2, and with the remaining matches being UU, Mono, and LC. The next game was Mono between Jaspros and Peachy Clouds, and the matchup is Dragon versus Psychic. Dragon is generally a pretty good Mono against everything that's not Fairy, so if you do queue up Fairy into it, it's like a near unwinnable matchup for Dragon. However, the other matchups are actually pretty good. Psychic is probably the most solid Mono. It's like a pretty good introductory Mono for anyone who doesn't really play Mono. And you can just make a lot of solid plays, and has a lot of playmaking potential, and a good matchup spread against mostly everything except for Scolipede with Bug with Scolipede, and Steel is pretty bad for it as well. So Jaspers leads Deoxys. This Deoxys is most likely some sort of hazard lead or something. So, but he actually reveals dual screens with Stealth Rocks, and so he goes for the double screens as Peachy Claus reveals Trick, Defog, Latios, which is pretty clean. Jasperose goes into his Victini and just U-turns. It most likely means at that point that it's actually Scarf Victini, just from the damage calc. Then Jasperose makes a risky double into his Latios, and Peachy Claus clicks Psychic. I'm not too sure. I assume it's because he doesn't have Dragon Stab on his Latios. As Latios misses the first Draco, I'm not too sure if it will matter in the end, but it was pretty bad. He switches out of his Latios, goes into Kyurem, and as Kyurem is Scarf and clicks Outrage, and for some reason Jasper doesn't calc this, but actually as Kyurem's Outrage kills the Gallade, which Jasper randomly sacks for no reason. Goes into the Alakazam, which clicks Counter. Once again, I'm not too sure why he would do that, because Peachy Claus would always want to keep around his Latios, or sorry, not Latios, his Kyurem. Here he does reveal Scarf Victini, but Latios is CMing on it, and then he misses Draco there, which I'm actually not sure if it mattered, because, oh no, it definitely does matter. And then he loses the tie, and yeah, so it's just bad times in general. And Latios is just CMing up, just really bad times, and then just manages to get the stored power off and pretty much cleans from this point because, yeah, that miss sucked. However, in the end, I don't think it super matters because even from that point, Kyurem puts a huge amount of pressure on from the, like, the Scarf Kyurem doesn't have solid answers, so the Latios 1v1ing the Specs Draco, which is kind of funny. Wait, is it Specs? It might be Soldew or something. I'm not too sure. And yeah, the Latios just wins. So 3-3 at this point with picking up a win. Peachy Claus picking up a win over Jasperose and Mono. Importantly to note here that, like, one of the things that I kind of noticed is a lot of their wins from the Weaviles side was actually, like, not very clean. So there hasn't been, like, a solid clean win, like, without hacks, I mean, from the Weaviles side. However, this one was the closest to it. Technically, there was a lot of hacks in this game. However, the hacks in this game didn't matter as much as, like, as people might make it out to be, because he only revealed, like, 4 Mons out of the 6, and, like, his Kyurem still put in a huge amount of work. So even if in that case that the Latios does kill, there's still, like, a large percentage of chance. Like, Peachy Claus was still heavily favored to win from that point. Granted, like, the fact that it never got to that point means that we will never know. However, like, this was, like, the match that was least affected by hacks out of the 3 that the Weaviles did win. So going into the next one is Jordan versus Omnis Draco, the UU match. It's played in OU because Mega Venusaur was technically allowed for this round, although we didn't see Mega Venusaur in this specific match. We saw it in the other semifinals. Going into the teams, Omnis Draco brought a pretty solid U-turn offense, like Volt turn, quote unquote, but no Volt switch, just a U-turn offense with Hazard Setters and Toxic Spikes from Tentacruel and Nidoqueen, where Jordan brought a HO team of sorts with Como and Altaria as primary sweepers. So we can go right into it. Jordan goes Scizor against the predicted Mega Beedrill lead, and Beedrill for some reason is the Toxic Specker. I also don't get why Omnis Draco risked the Beedrill turn 1, because if Beedrill goes down, then, like, Starmie and Altaria are huge issues for him. But he ends up predicting correctly with the knock, and then the Bullet Punch on the Tentacruel, and the Tentacruel actually is an offensive Tentacruel set, which ends up trading for the Starmie. Starmie trades its life to clear the Toxic Spikes. And then he goes into the Azelf, which sets up Stealth Rocks, and then trades its life for the Tentacruel. Goes into the Altaria on the Beedrill. Ominous Draco just sacked the Beedrill to try to get a favorable matchup there. Jordan goes into his Como on the Ice Beam, Como being like the least important one in his team in this matchup. I believe that's Specs just from the damage, however I'm not 100%. He goes into his Koba here. Oh yeah, Como is not important because Como lost to every single mod remaining. It could be a decent check to if it's defensive, like SD Scizor. However, like that scenario didn't really matter that much in his head, I assume, as opposed to just keeping around Koba for like SD. Also, because Scizor is most likely an offensive set anyway, like it's unlikely that it's defensive SD specifically, which would be the matchup that Como would help in. So he goes into the Latias, and because I mentioned earlier that he needs the Koba to check Scizor, it's important he preserves Koba's HP, goes into his own Scizor, and then clicks U-turn here, I believe. No, he clicks Knockoff. And then as he reveals CB on Scizor. Honestly, I would have liked to see Ominous Draco preserve the Scizor HP because it was important in this matchup. However, I get why he went into Scizor, as he probably was predicting the BP and didn't want to sack his Latias. So he goes into Scizor, and the Scizor clicks Superpower, predicting the Koba to come in, but obviously doesn't. And then he clicks Bullet Punch as Altaria goes for the Dragon Dance. And then predicting the Earthquake, Ominous Draco goes into his Latias. I assume at least he's predicting Earthquake, but it's also possible that he was just predicting the predicting him to boost, because this is it was potentially, or this is Scarf Latias actually. So then preserving his Latias's HP, he goes for the switch into Hydreigon to sack it. But then he ends up actually giving Altaria a free setup. So goes ahead and just clicks. I'm not too sure what Jordan is fishing for here, but I guess a low roll. And then he just is going to roost on the Hydreigon until he gets to like 60% or whatever. And because of Altaria's spread, I assume he calcs this and he lives the Scizor BP. So Altaria actually cleans up from this point, I believe. I think he's fishing for a low roll here. I believe that is what is going on. Okay, that is a low roll. Yeah, he was fishing for the low roll. I believe that's because he calced this and he lives the BP or something. Oh, wait. I guess he was just trying to bait in the Scizor. Interesting. Yeah, and then from that point, then he wins with the Koba plus the Altaria taking the Psychic hit. So, nice win for Jordan. Not too sure about the endgame, but yeah, there's a couple misplays in my opinion from Ominous Draco's side. I think there's a couple times he could have played better, but he lost like 150-50, which was important, which was the Scizor one. And then I didn't really see the first play being super necessary. Like I would have kept around Beedrill, as Beedrill is probably more helpful in this matchup than like, you know, one layer of Toxic Spikes. But anyway, with Jordan winning, that means that it was actually 4-3 to Weaviles, and the last game was a must-win for the Poliwrath with Simbo, and the McHav would clinch their finals berth for the Weaviles. So actually the Shellos comes out. I was told later that Simbo actually didn't know that this was like the stakes for this match, so I think he was just kind of memeing. Okay. Goes ahead and leads Mienfoo. Mienfoo fakes out on the Volibee. Actually kind of interesting play. It goes into the Shellos. Shellos actually takes like 0 damage. It's hilarious. He goes ahead and recovers. Goes into the Pharaoh Seed, which is like something to pressure the Shellos. Actually, nothing on his team other than Pharaoh Seed actually can reliably pressure the Shellos, except for maybe Abra. But Abra would need to trade its trade stuff to do so. Simba goes into the Grimer, goes for the knock, I believe here. Yeah, because knock is safe and also pressures the majority of McCav's team, as like knock pressure is just a thing. So Simba goes into his Volibee, and I believe he trades his Volibee for knocking the Spritzy, which is pretty worth it for him. Oh, actually no, he just goes for the switch on Shellos and keeps his Volibee. Then he recovers with Shellos and then just goes into his Fu, which is pretty safe on the Pharaoh Seed, as he trades a lot of HP, but doesn't necessarily need the Fu in this matchup, as he goes for the U-turn, but actually dies to the Iron Barbs. But because of that, he actually gets the trap on with Trap Inch, which is very important, as Pharaoh Seed was one of the only mons that actually could stop Shellos, as you'll later see the set. Volibee then is a solid switch into his own Volibee, and he goes for the Defog, revealing the Berry Juice Defog set, as McCav kills the Volibee with Supersonic Sky Strike. He goes into his own Shellos, and holy, just does 0 damage, 33 from Brave Bird from Volibee. And the Shellos actually, like, I have no idea what to say, honestly. And okay, I'm actually curious. Is that HP grass? Because, like, Shellos' only weakness is... Oh, wait, no. Shellos is mono water. I didn't know that, actually. Yeah, okay. Volibee. Yeah, it does 22 damage. What the heck? That's actually insane. Okay, he goes into the Abra, and the Abra gets trapped by Grimer, and it dies. And then he goes into Mudbray. Mudbray kills the Grimer, has Grimer already did his job. And Shellos takes 37 from Mudbray Earthquake. What even is this? Like, and he just sets up all the way. And just sets up. Can't get removed because Sticky Hold is a thing. Sets up. Then just clicks return. It's mono return. Out of all moves. I guess it's for neutral coverage because you just want it to set up, and then yeah. Shellos just puts in... I don't even know what that... Like, this came out of completely left field. Just Shellos coming in. I can't get knocked, so once it starts boosting, it's really hard to stop. And then you just, like... I don't know where this even came from. Like, it was actually genius, but... It was so good. But, like, such a weird match for, like, the finals... or semifinals of BLT with the game on, like, the series on the line. If Simbo lost this game, then that meant the Poliwraths are out. But he does manage to win with this unorthodox set, which actually works out super well. And good on him. And that brings us to a tiebreaker. So how tiebreakers work in BLT is that there's an OU match, and then each team picks their own tier, and then you submit those 3 players. So it doesn't actually have to be whatever you normally lead with. So the matchup ended up being here. Let me pull it up. Because of how tiebreakers work, you obviously want your best players to be playing, right? So you want your best matchups to be playing. So how they made their lineup was Jordan wanted to play playing OU was the best option for the Weaviles, and then they picked King Leo to play doubles, which was doubles was the tier that the Poliwraths chose, and then mono was the tier that Weaviles chose with Peachy Clouds, and then Ominous Draco was put into mono for the Poliwraths. So it was Big Boy versus Jordan, King Leo versus Cheese, and Peachy Clouds versus Ominous Draco. And just going through that, it would be, I think Jordan versus Big Boy is probably the swing matchup. It's very, very close. I would say Jordan is slightly favored, but like not by much. King Leo versus Cheese. Cheese is hugely favored. This is like the not close one out of the three. And then Ominous Draco versus Peachy Clouds. I'd say Peachy Clouds is slightly favored. However, it's monotype and a lot of things could change. And Ominous Draco is obviously not a bad player, so it could very well be that Ominous Draco could win that as well. So it's very, very close between these three. So it's gonna, like, it could be any, like, other than the doubles game, which the Poliwraths have pretty much have in the bag. The other two games are close. I would say that, well, yeah. Anyway, so just going into the match, first off, to preface, the OU game was actually lost. I'll talk about it. It was the second game that happened. So doubles was King Leo versus Cheese, and then I'll talk about the Jordan versus Big Boy game, and then I'll talk about the mono game after I talked about the OU game, but I won't have a replay to go through for the OU game. Okay, so just going through matchups, Cheese brought a Milotic team with Life Orb Kyurem, I assume this is, and then a Mega Gengar. And Leo again brought a Mega Gengar team, but this time with a Rakuten. Webs plus Mega Gengar is very good against opposing Mega Gengar teams because obviously what you are trying to do with Mega Gengar is you're trying to get good matchups 1 versus 1, and obviously Webs gives you better matchups in general. So from team preview, it looks like Leo's actually a little bit favored. However, once again, Cheese is a better player overall, and doubles is a tier that is heavily, like a hugely skill-based tier. No, sorry, that's not the right way to put it. Doubles is a tier that requires a lot of skill to play. So to play at the close to optimal level, it takes a lot more skill than a normal tier would. So Cheese leads with Mega Gengar, where Leo leads with Araquanid. Importantly here, that Leo doesn't actually need to lead with Mega Gengar in this matchup, as it's more important for him to get webs down. And okay, so you can only prioritize one slot in doubles as your lead because you want to do things right. You want to do one thing, importantly. But you also can't just straight up lose the matchup. So you can't just, he cannot lead here Araquanid plus Mega Gengar because it could potentially just straight up lose him so much pressure. So he wants to lead Araquanid first, as webs is more important to get down than getting the Gengar trap in this matchup. As I said before, that if you get webs down plus the trap, it gives you a huge advantage. Cheese, on the other hand, wants the Mega Gengar as soon as possible. So he goes into his Gengar. As Genesect goes for the Iron Head. He goes for Icy Wind on both Genesect and Araquanid, as Araquanid sets webs. And then he goes for the sub, which is pretty safe. I think if he did choose to double focus on the Gengar, that could have been potentially bad for Cheese, but he does not do that. So he ends up in a decent place, and then he goes for the sub again. I assume because he was predicting the Araquanid not to hit the Gengar on the Protect, but I would have preferred just staying the Protect there. And then he chooses to here hit Gengar, which I think was a little bit strange, as this one was almost always going to be a Protect. And I'm not too sure about that Sludge Bomb. I assume because he calced it and then he didn't, that was the result, but I believe there could have been a better way to approach that. But he ends up losing his Gengar, and the Coco goes ahead and Volt Switches, which puts a huge dent in um, in the Kartana, and the Kartana just dies. Because, yeah, it does like nothing. But importantly, because of competitive, the Milotic now has +2 special attack. And this is hugely important because it's really hard for Leo to kill Milotic with Coco being the only way to pressure it. And he gets off a free recover here as well, so goes for the Stealth Rocks here, and he ends up trading his Landorus for it, but does pick up the kill on the opposing Landorus with Milotic's Icy Wind, which, yeah. So King Leo goes Coco here, but I thought that this was a really, really bad play, actually, because every time here, it is correct for Cheese to go into his Tapu Lele, because there's only 2 scenarios that happen. So, okay, and King Leo, at this point, he's in a hugely favored position. He just needs to essentially clean up here because he already has is hugely favored. So it was actually correct for him to go Genesect here, or even Mega Gengar. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that Cheese will always go Lele here, and the reason why is because he needs the Milotic to then pick up the Psychic Seed as soon as possible. And so it's wrong for him to go Coco because Coco is the only way he can pressure Milotic, and so he needs the terrain up to pressure the Milotic. So here you actually see that he goes for the Thunderbolt and doesn't even do 50% to the Milotic. And this would do like 63 or something like that. Okay, because it's times 1.5, right? So it would do 63 with the terrain. So the fact that he doesn't get that off means that he actually loses the game. So he then U-turns, which was, once again, incorrect because you already saw the damage calc of him. You already saw the damage calc of the Genesect versus the Milotic, so you know that it never kills from that range. However, the Lele, you could have just killed off Lele and then killed off the Kyurem after, and then just 2v1 the Milotic down, which it couldn't take the pressure. Eventually, it would fall to the Genesect and Gengar and Araquanid. It could eventually die. But, like, the fact that he kept, like, this is a huge choke by Leo to do that. And then once again, the Milotic can just recover over and over again. At this point, it was always correct here for Leo just to kill off the Lele. And so, yeah, he goes for the Iron Head here, but it's like far too late. He should have done it earlier. And so, like, then he tries to go back to trying to kill off the Milotic. So this is just a hugely bad, like, sequence from Leo, as he should, like, this was a position from the game, like, in this game, he should have been in a position to win. But he ends up not winning because, like, he made some hugely bad plays. So Cheese wins barely in a really tough matchup, but, like, it should have been a game that didn't get this close. Like, Leo should have won a lot earlier. That said, then we go into our OU match between Jordan and Big Boy. Now, the things I remember from this match are that it ended with Jordan winning pretty solidly. He had a large lead throughout the majority of the game. He ended up missing, or sorry, Big Boy ended up missing a Magma Storm on the Tangrowth. However, I believe it didn't matter in the end, or something like it. He would live it, but then Jordan cleaned up in the end with a Tangrowth. I'm not too sure if it actually did end up not mattering, but yeah, the Magma Storm miss could have potentially been troublesome. But Jordan did pick up the win for the Weaviles there, and then put it into a series finale game with mono on the line, or sorry, the series on the line with Final Birth on the line, with mono being the last match. And that is Peachy Clouds versus Ominous Draco, which just happened sometime yesterday night, I believe. So yeah, so we see another flying mono game. This time, PG Clouds is most likely to be favored, as you know, Thunderous Therian is a huge advantage to the flying user who has that mon, because it can OHKO almost every other mon. However, this team is unlike the other one, which was Kyther versus. Oh yeah, he did tell me that Kyther, not Kather, Kyther. Yeah, so Kyther versus who was the other guy he was playing against? Um, um, Kyther versus Saba. Yes. Unlike Kyther versus Saba, where Saba's team was like a Stolly-ish team with like Zapdos, Ominous Draco actually took the complete opposite route with like Stolly/Balance team. Ominous Draco actually has like a hyper offense team. So even though Thunderous Therian is really good in this matchup, it's possible that it never gets in and sees the light of day, because if you just continually exert offensive pressure, there's no way for Thunderous to actually get in and be able to deal like set up and like get a very good matchup. Like it does, however, OHKO every mon 1v1 if it does manage to set up. It also outspeeds, importantly, like half the team. Like it outspeeds Dragonite, it outspeeds Charizard, it outspeeds Landorus, and it outspeeds Hawlucha, and it outspeeds Landorus and outspeeds Celesteela, and it could potentially outspeed the Hawlucha, but it probably doesn't actually, because I was thinking about outspeeding Hawlucha, but then that's only if it's like in a seed set. So in mono, I believe it will always run close to max speed. So he leads with the Aerodactyl, and this is where you can see it. Okay, because you know see the Charizard, it's actually guaranteed that the Aerodactyl is not a Mega form. So he goes for the Stealth Rocks. It's a Stealth Rocks lead, and then he goes for the Taunt here. He's slower, so I don't really get the Taunt. I would have just gone for Rock Slide here, but whatever, and not a huge deal. He goes into a Celesteela and goes for the Automize, I believe, or Air Slash. No, Flash Cannon. And then he goes for the Air Slash here, predicting the Mantine, and he does get us right. And then he goes for the Air Slash again on the Defog, which was a good play. And he then goes for the Supersonic Sky Strike, but PG's getting that out, goes for the Celesteela. And then he goes for the Flamethrower on the Celesteela, which chips it down. Goes for Leech Seed. Then goes into his Torn on the Air Slash. Didn't matter, but yeah. Torn then eats another Air Slash as I believe Ominous Draco is just trying to not to let Mantine in. Then goes into his Dragonite, which gets off a Dragon Dance. And then he goes for the Fire Punch here, I believe. No, he goes for the double Dragon Dance. Yeah, which is a good play on his part. He goes for the E-Speed and then goes into his Tornadus. Not too sure about this Tornadus play, but I assume he was just trying to force out the Outrage. Goes for the Protect. I assume trying to fish for Confusion now, but gets the Lumberry. And then he Fire Punches on the Gliscor. Kills the Gliscor, and then he goes into his Aerodactyl, which also eats another Outrage. Goes for the Outrage again, kills the Celesteela, and now with Confusion, he clicks Outrage once, doesn't get it, gets confused, and here Ominous Draco actually makes a huge misplay. Here he should have gone for the E-Speed, and then there's a potential for him to win this game, because he actually could have won if he went for the E-Speed, goes into his Landorus, predicts with the HP Ice, goes into his Halucha, and then with the Halucha, he gets the speed boost, and then he can finish off the Thunderous Therian at that point. It gives him a chance to win the game here. Obviously, getting hit in Confusion is a terrible, terrible thing, because it's a 20% chance, I believe. But yeah, like, he should have given himself a chance with the E-Speed. Like, not clicking E-Speed there was just wrong every time. So yeah, he ends up losing from this point because there's actually no way for him to win. Thunderous is just too good versus flying, and yeah, he just clicks buttons and just wins. Button clicks, button clicks. Yeah, and so PG Clouds wins and puts Weaviles in the finals versus us, the Laxes. I'd say we're pretty heavily favored. We actually beat them in week 3 while we were memeing, so if we try, in theory, we should do better. Obviously, I don't want to get too cocky, but I hope that we can pick up this win for BLT. It's unfortunate that we lost the OU game, the OU replay between Jordan and Big Boy, because that would have been a good replay to break down. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and that's about it for this. It's quite a long one, so I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time for another BLT recap and highlights, and as well as a recap and analysis video of my match next week. So until then, that's about it for me.